Hey, y'all, welcome back to another week of the Restart Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. And listen, today I decided to name this episode Narcissist. Do you know one? And before I decided to name it that, I was thinking a couple different things. Do I call it narcissism? Do I call it narcissistic abuse? And another one that I wanted to call this episode was people don't want you to win because a narcissist does just that. They want to win and they definitely do not want you to win. But I decided to go with just the basic word of narcissist because more than likely, you have someone in your life who is one. You have lived with one, maybe you married one, maybe you grew up with one like I did and married one. So I think that we have all encountered a narc at some point in our life. But how do you know when someone is a narcissist versus just being arrogant? How do you know? There's a subtle difference, but it really all comes down to their motives. And with a narc, they are very aware of how they treat you. Someone who is arrogant is going to be more concerned about how they appear and how it benefits them. But a narcissist is going to make sure that they do both of those things and they bring you down in the process. So I will tell you a little backstory about myself. I grew up with a very narcissistic mother. Throughout my childhood, I did not know that she was a narcissist because I didn't know that word even existed. It wasn't until about my mid 30s that I started to have these vivid memories of different things that happened in my childhood. And I realized that my own mother didn't even like me. She did not like me, and to this day does not like me. I think that we have learned, the both of us, to tolerate each other. We have learned to accept each other as we are, but I can tell that she still doesn't like me. And quite frankly, I really don't like her. I love her as my mother, and I feel like she loves me, but it's not a genuine, adoring, endearing, motherly love that I would expect her to have and that I have with my own children. So anyway, going back to my childhood, my mother was very jealous of my relationship with my dad. And there were many times that dad would give me money and he would say, here's $50, but don't tell your mother because I'll have to give her the same. Or, hey, here's some money for gas, but don't let your mother know I gave it to you because I'll have to give her that much or more. And at the time, when I was a kid, you don't really think about the motive behind things as a child. But back then, I chalked it up to, well, dad's just being dad. He just doesn't want to give away a lot of his money, or he's just being funny, cracking a joke or whatever. Or, maybe him and mom got into an argument and he just doesn't want her to know what he's doing for me type thing. Right. But as I got older, I realize now why dad said that, because mom was always very jealous of me and how my dad loved me. And there were other things that happened. Like my dad would, a lot of times after school, take me to get ice cream. Or Saturday morning, we would always go and get, donuts every Saturday. And that would be a vivid memory that I recall happening a lot. And mom would just really close herself off. She would huff and puff around the house and give my dad the silent treatment a lot. Or my dad would get into an argument with her and then just have to totally end up leaving the house because it was like, they say the elephant in the room. Well, this was the tension in the room was so strong that, I mean, I could even feel it as a kid. But I realized that there was an underlying need for her to compete with me for my dad's attention. So, anyway, going through my childhood and then on into my 20s and leaving home and coming back a few times, I began to notice the distance that separates my mother and myself. Like, for instance, she's not a very affectionate mother. So if I wanted a hug, I would have to go to her to get a hug. She's not the type to come up and just reach out and give me a hug. And still to this day, she doesn't do that. Or, if I wanted to sit down and have a conversation with her, I would have to go to her versus her coming and wanting to spend time with me, to see me, to get to know about what's going on in my life. And then even when I would tell her things about my life, she would then turn it around and make it about herself. So very self-absorbed, very, attention getting and that sort of thing. So on into my adulthood, I then married my now ex-husband, who was also and still is to this day, a severe narcissist. He is even a sociopathic narcissist. These are people that really concoct evil, and their motives are for harm. They're meant to hurt people. They're meant to sabotage people, their plans, their future, their lives, their careers, their next relationships. Sociopathic narcissists completely live for themselves and themselves alone. If it is not benefiting them in any way, they are going to make sure that it does, even if they go to great lengths to do that. So, my ex-husband was an alcoholic, an abuser. There was domestic violence in that marriage, but all throughout the relationship, he was constantly focused on putting himself into the limelight and making sure that he was noticed, even if that meant destroying others. So, someone who is arrogant is going to want to put themselves first, but they're not going to go to extremes to destroy others in the process of doing that, whereas a narcissist will. So, that's a very vivid difference in someone who's prideful versus someone who is an actual narc. So I think that I attracted my ex-husband into my life because of what I had suffered already with my mother. Because the brain does a very weird thing in that it attaches to what it knows, right? The brain likes familiarity. The brain likes repetitiveness. The brain likes to know what is coming up in the future so it can prepare for that. Even though most of the time we don't know what's coming up, right? But our brain wants that assurity. So I believe that because of the trauma bond that I experienced as a child with my mother, I attracted that same relationship with my ex-husband because my brain associated narcissism with love. My brain associated the competitiveness and the hurting of others as a form of love and protection for myself. So I say that now because I'm older, I'm much wiser, and I can look back and see that those two people in my life, my mother and my ex husband, really framed my belief for my relationships and myself. And it has been the cause of a lot of my low self esteem. It has been the cause of my lack of self worth. Even to this day, I will tell you that I struggle with self worth. I struggle with the belief that I am good enough for being treated like a queen. I am worth being pursued. I am worth being cared for and nurtured and adored and loved correctly. And so, back about 5 years ago, I was in a relationship, a very brief relationship, but nonetheless, I was with a man who treated me the exact polar opposite of my ex husband and any other man that I had been with. He put me on a pedestal. He did everything for me. He helped me. He supported me. And most importantly, he loved me correctly. But long story short, I ended up sabotaging that relationship because I wasn't ready for that type of healthy love. I wasn't ready to be loved that way because I had never been loved that way. I had never been loved in a healthy manner before him. So my brain did not associate that relationship with love. It was actually, at the time, it was actually boring to me. It was just kind of blah, so. It wasn't exciting because I had been used to the arguing and the competitiveness and the jealousy and the attention seeking that I had known from my mother and the ex husband. So the relationship with this man didn't last that long. I would say 6, 7 months. And I take responsibility for the failure of that relationship because I lashed out at him in a manner that was completely unnecessary. And it was very mean and inappropriate. But at the time, I thought that I was justified in saying that. But in hindsight, of course, I realized I was not. But now I'm like, wow, I really was loved probably the most purely and the most authentically at that time that I have ever been loved in my life. And I will tell you that since that relationship, I have not been loved in that way since. So it just goes to show you that though that type of love and men who love like that are very few and far between. So if you find that, do your best to nurture it and keep it and keep it growing and healthy and active, because men like that don't come around very often. But in any case, so narcissists are self seeking. They are going to make sure that they are seen and they are heard, even if it means at the expense of another person. They are set on destroying others. Whereas someone who is just arrogant wants to feel that they are also seen and heard and that their opinions are valid, but they're not going to do it in a sense of harming others. They're going to be prideful, but not to the extreme that a narcissist is. So, what can you do if you have a narc in your life or if you encounter one in your life? The best thing to do is to not engage with them in a battle of opinion, because they don't shut down, they don't turn off. They're going to keep going and pushing your buttons and trying to make you angry because they want a reaction out of you. So if you back down and don't give them a reaction, they have nothing to work with. They don't have anyone to argue with. They don't have anyone to prove anything to. They don't have anyone to impress. So the best thing for you to do if you are involved or you ever do become involved with a narc is to stay quiet and just walk away, because silence will actually fluster them so much. They don't know what to do when someone is not battling it out with them. And if they keep nagging and annoying you and trying to get you pulled into their toxic world, the best thing to do, again, is just be direct with them and honest and say, I'm not going to do this with you. I'm not going back and forth with you. You're entitled to what you believe, as I am. You have a right to speak your mind just as I do, but I'm not doing this with you. And you put up a boundary with them, because narcs don't understand boundaries. They don't know the word no. They don't. They don't know that people have limits, because they don't have limits in their own lives. So when you put up a boundary with a narc, keep it in place. Don't keep going back and forth. Don't let that guard down, because you, as a normal person, is going to eventually have compassion for them. You're going to think, well, maybe they've changed and maybe I should give them another chance, and maybe I'll try to reconcile and work things out with them. But the reality is, narcs don't change, only with God's help. But 99% of the time, they're not going to change. They are who they are. Who they showed you is exactly who they are. And you need to believe that and realize that a boundary is your saving grace. It is your peace. It is your sanity line, and you are entitled to that peace. You are entitled to that boundary, and you never have to feel guilty for having that. So, to conclude, more than likely, you probably do know a narcissist. And if you do, I hope that this episode helps you and gives you a little bit more assurance that you're not going crazy. You're not at fault for wanting to, again, keep those walls up and keep your guard up, because people like that will drain you. They are toxic. They are toxic to you mentally. They are toxic to your emotional health, and they are toxic to you physically. A narcissist will stress you out and raise your blood pressure if you allow it, because they just nag and push and frustrate. That's what they do. But you don't have to be around that. You don't have to deal with that. You can walk away. You can hold your head high knowing that you are not a narc, and go on about your life in a peaceful manner. So anyway, guys, I hope this episode helps you today. And remember, a narcissist opinion of you is no indication of who you are. You are who God says you are, not who they say you are. Okay? All right. Thank you for joining me. And if you like this episode, please give us a rating, write a review, and share it with someone else that you know will benefit from this. Thank you so much for being here.